Welcome to the Plant-Free MD podcast with Dr. Anthony Chaffee, where we discuss diet and nutrition and how this affects health and chronic disease, and show you how you can use this to optimize your health and happiness, both mentally and physically. Hey guys, just want to take a second to thank our sponsor, Carnivore Bar. I don't promote many products because honestly, all you need to be healthy is to just eat meat. For those times that you're out hiking, road tripping, or stuck at work and you want a nutritious snack that is just meat, fat, and salt if you want it, the Carnivore Bar is a great option. So I like this product not because it's just pure meat, but also because I want the carnivore market to thrive as well. And the more we support meat-only products, the more meat-only products there will be available in the mainstream. So if this sounds like something you'd like to get behind, check it out using my discount code Anthony to get 10% off, which also applies to subscriptions, giving you 25% off total. All right. Thanks, guys. Hello, everyone. It's Dr. Anthony Chaffee, and I'm here with a very special group set of guests, Brett and Harry from the Meat Mafia Podcast. Guys, how are you doing? Thanks for coming on.
Good, man. Thanks for having us. We're excited to be here.
Yeah, well, it's great to have you. It was a pleasure to come on your podcast. I love talking to you guys. So I'm glad that you guys were able to come back on and hang out on mine for a while.
Yeah, it was good to get into the weeds and talk a little bit about meat with you. That was a good combo. So hopefully running it back here will be great.
Cool. Well, for those who haven't come across you guys, can you just tell us a bit about yourself and what you're doing and give a bit of background?
Brett, you want to take that one?
Yeah, and Harry, correct me where if there's anything that I leave out. But yeah, so we both separately run the Meat Mafia account. So we both have our own Twitter accounts. We kind of have this like pseudo anonymous Italian shtick that we've been playing off of each other. But, really this whole interest in nutrition is like an extension of our friendship. So we both played collegiate baseball together. We went to Babson College, which is a small D3 school, business school up in Boston, Massachusetts. And we both kind of had our own separate nutritional journeys when we graduated. Going into my senior year, I got diagnosed with ulcerative colitis when I was 21 years old. I was working an internship in New York City. I was living at home with my parents in New Jersey and started developing this blood in my stool when I would go to the bathroom. And, like a lot of people that get UC, I just didn't really say anything. I was a little bit embarrassed about it and just young and dumb. And by the end of that summer, over the course of 3 months, I was going to the bathroom 20 to 30 times a day. So ended up in the hospital, got a colonoscopy, got diagnosed with colitis. And with that diagnosis, I was told that I was going to be on the biologic Remicade for the rest of my life. And then also Lialda. And then I was on a dosage of prednisone for some time. So, at that point, I really wasn't thinking about diet and lifestyle at all. I was just thinking that I was going to be dependent on this medication. And, I really fell into that category of being fit, but unhealthy. So like I was playing college baseball. I was in good shape, aesthetically, good muscle tone, but just really was not taking care of myself. I was drinking too much. I wasn't sleeping enough. I was eating a lot of fried processed food. I was chronically stressed out, putting way too much pressure on myself with baseball. So like looking back now, it makes perfect sense as to like why I contracted something like that. And I would say everything changed for me in 2019 when I came across Dr. Baker on Joe Rogan's podcast for the first time. And he was talking about, all these patients that had these incurable autoimmune conditions that were curing it by eating an animal-based carnivore diet. And then the other interesting thing, Dr. Chaffee, is I started seeing all these people on Reddit that were talking about curing their Crohn's colitis IBS through a carnivore diet. So, from my perspective, if there was anything that I could do to get off of this medication that was costing me $50,000 an infusion every 8 weeks, like I was willing to try it at that point. So like you think about the cost for me with the medical system, and I think there's over like 1 million people with Crohn's colitis IBS nationwide. So you can do the math on how much that adds up. But I'm not kidding. I remember very vividly within the first 7 days of doing this diet, I had gone down immediately to like 1 to 2 bowel movements a day. That's all it took, was about a week. So for me, that was really like the first indication of, wow, like controlling my dietary inputs and my lifestyle has a massive implications on my GI health, my quality of life. My skin got healthier. My lifts in the gym went way up. My anxiety went away. Mental mood went great. And then since then, I've just kind of refined it over time. And then, when you have ulcerative colitis, you're supposed to get a colonoscopy every 2 years just to make sure, you don't have colon cancer and you don't have an inflammation or any flare-ups. And so in 2021, all my inflammation went away, all my microinflammation went away, and I've been off Remicade for over a year and feel fantastic. So, I think a lot of our goal with what we're doing at the Meat Mafia is to try and talk to what's kind of gone wrong with our food system and how we can control our dietary inputs to make us healthier overall as a society. And Harrison, I know you've had your own incredible story with your health, but it's really like a convergence of both of our health journeys that have led us to this point where we're at now.
Nice. Yeah.
I think like the backbone of us both being competitive athletes too, after graduating college, we were both looking for those outlets to put that competitive nature and energy into. And so both of us were kind of drawn to this endurance sport arena. And we started doing these like Ironmans at different distances, marathons at different distances, and ultimately like reconnected through that. I went and worked at a corporate job, same with Brett. And we kind of fell out of touch, but a few years after graduation, we saw that each other were running these events and we started doing these races together. And ultimately we ended up running, long story short, running the Waco Ironman together this past fall and last October. And we were living together for like a month leading up to it, training, eating together. I still remember our first grocery store run was like hilarious because we got to the checkout line and both of us were eating carnivore or like as animal based as possible. And the lady's like, "Are you guys throwing a party this weekend?" And it was just me and Brett like eating for a week, just ridiculous grocery bill. But that was kind of like the groundwork for us being like, hey, we've both kind of had our own journeys. I went from being kind of unhealthy corporate guy to figuring out how to get control of my health through a keto diet. And then that sort of kept evolving into a more strict version of the animal-based diet and then carnivore diet. So, we both had that journey together, and then that event itself kind of brought us working together into fruition, which has just been really fun. I mean, we figured out things that we're passionate about through writing about the food system and just all the areas that, a lot of the information that's out there just leads people down in the wrong direction. And something that we're just passionate about is kind of rewriting that and letting people know that, they can experiment with food themselves and figure out what works best for them. But ultimately, like, real foods kind of tell the best story. And, we're excited to keep moving that ball forward.
Nice. And so how did you get to carnivore yourself?
Yeah. So I experimented with a paleo diet in college. I was playing baseball and got really strict with a paleo diet and felt the best I ever had. I had always been big in the gym, but had never really dialed in the diet. I, struggled with some like cystic acne, but in high school, and looked great, but like my face was telling a completely different story, and ultimately got on some medication to fix that, and basically glossed over the entire problem of my diet was not right. And so getting to college, I was looking to improve my performance. And so I focused more on my diet, still had the great training and saw great results. And then once I graduated and started working in the corporate world, was like in the gym, but not as intense and not as competitive, and sort of lost my fastball, so to speak. And, once I had gone down that path, I was, hit the breaking point. I was like, all right, I need to regain my purpose here with my fitness goals, and started that keto diet. And so that was kind of the light bulb for me, because it took about, 2 weeks of just like strict eating. And my keto diet was basically, it was as clean. I was just eating animal based and felt amazing. Weight dropped off like crazy. I can pack on weight pretty easily, but I dropped like 20 pounds in 2 weeks and 20 pounds in 2 weeks. And the rest was history. I was just continuing to look for that little edge and see what else I could tweak.
Yeah. And then what convinced you to go like straight up carnivore? Was it a similar sort of thing, like coming across like Dr. Baker? And how long have you been doing it? I know, Brett, you said have you been full carnivore since 2019, Brett?
I haven't been, I've been on and off, but it's kind of like, that's like my return to base. So like I do throw in fruits and raw dairy. And we were talking about that a little bit when we met in Austin, but I honestly feel the best on your approach, which is that pure, the closer I can get to red meat and salt, that's when I feel the best.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah. So how long have you been doing it?
Yeah. So I started at the beginning of COVID with the whole keto journey in 2020. So, same thing with Brett. I've been using it more as a lever to like get back to baseline, but honestly, the stricter I go, usually the better I feel. So it's like, I kind of try to keep my bandwidth in terms of what I include in that diet as little, as narrow as possible. My grocery store runs are usually pretty boring in terms of what I pick up. So it's usually consists of eggs and ground beef mostly. So
I don't know. It sounds exciting to me. Like every time I get thrilled every time I go to the meat section at Costco and I just like stack this big ass, cart full of meat. Like, I mean, I just keep looking at them like, this is awesome. I stack my fridge. I'm like, that has never looked boring to me. Like I still show people, I'll show patients and things like that. Like the picture on Instagram of my refrigerator, just stuffed with meat. And they're just talking about, it's like, really, just meat? I'm like, I'm going to show you something. Like, look at this. And they're like, oh my God, look at this, And no, I always get really excited on that. Yeah. So you're speaking my language there.
I just ordered my first quarter cow. So I'm in an apartment, so I have some space limitations, but I've always been big on the idea of just having those bulk orders. Like I love just having meat on hand. You never know when that moment of inspiration or like when you just want to throw down a steak. So just getting like a big bulk order. So I've got the chest freezer coming and my bulk order coming mid-September. So I'm pumped.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. You never know when the zombies are coming too. So you want to have like have a stocked freezer.
The vegan zombies.
Yeah. The one thing I will say, Harry has more butter in his fridge than anyone you'll ever meet. I think Harry, you must have 5 pounds of butter in that fridge.
Jesus.
I just always pick it up when I go and I just don't use it fast enough, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've got a lot of butter in my fridge. I'll send a picture.
Yeah.
I'm ready to go. Like if we run out of food, I'll at least have butter. So
yeah. I mean, I've got a few pounds of butter, like a couple of, I don't have 5 pounds of butter though. Like I definitely don't have that. But like, even then, like, I'll get like a kilo or 2 of butter, like at a time, and just have it there stocked, just so I don't have to like mess around, because like, the meat here in Australia is so lean. They've really bred out the cows.
Really?
They've bred them to be more lean. Because I mean, it makes sense. They if you accept the premise that fat is bad for you, well, then you should eliminate fat. Just like I accept the premise that plants are bad for you, so I eliminate plants, and so I understand the motivation. It's the same motivation as I have. But Australia has really taken that to heart. The whole fat and cholesterol are bad for you. And so it's just that like the market is driven by that. And so I was talking to a meat distributor, and I was like I was talking about fat content. And they're like, oh, well, steering me towards sort of lean things. I was like, no, I want like your fattiest thing. Like, you have anything that hasn't been like trimmed to distraction. And they're like, it's so refreshing to hear that. Like, most people are just the opposite, and they get really pissed off that these things have fat. And one lady, I swear to God, bought a ribeye loin, like the entire, ribeye roast sort of thing. And then like came back like the next day or the day after with basically this bag of meat of fat that they trimmed off of the ribeye, and just be like, you owe me 3 kilos of meat. This had all this fat on. I don't want this fat. And it's like, she trimmed it off. It's just like, then don't buy the ribeye, you idiot. Like, what's wrong with you? You chose that, and then she came back and she demanded that they give her, 3 kilos or whatever, equivalent weight of just meat, It's like, oh, all this fat or whatever. It's just like, why would you buy the fattiest cut of meat if you didn't want the fat,
Totally.
and then complain about it? So, so they're really averse to the fat. And so I was talking to a rancher, and they said that like they've actually bred the cattle here. They said they've ruined the breed because they have very, very low fat. Even grain finishing them, they have very low fat. And so, so it's crazy they did that. But as a result, these things are much leaner than I prefer. And so I'll melt butter into most of these. I'll melt butter into the ribeyes here by and large.
Ooh.
And, but now the ribeyes are literally double the price. I'm like, I'm not going to contribute to that. And so I mostly go for New York's now. And those are definitely too lean. And because they trim so much here, they trim off just basically all the fat that's possible to trim off. And I wish I could get these guys before they ruin these steaks, but yeah, that's what I got to do.
Yeah.
You're known for the 50-50 ground beef, aren't you?
Yeah.
I remember hearing a story about that.
Yeah.
I heard they call you Dr. 50-50. I don't know if that's true or not, but
yeah, like it's good though. Have you guys tried that?
No, it sounds incredible.
Us too. Yeah, we got to go to a butcher and just specially request it, I think.
Yeah. I think if you make like a big order, you get like 10 pounds in a go. They'll make it for you because they'll do like a whole batch at around however much that is. And so if you buy the whole batch, they'll sort of make it for you however you want. And, or at least they did for me. And it tastes so much better. And obviously you cook it too much, you'll render out all of the fat. So, you want it sort of more medium rare to rare and just sort of seared on the outside. But no, it tastes great. And the ground beef here is intensely lean. And, I'm like 95% lean in some of these things, 95, 93, 90. And then like the really fatty stuff was like the low grade, meaning that it has more fat in it, is like 85%. And I was just like, I don't think I've ever seen 85% in America. Like that's like, like 80%, it was, well, maybe 85, but like around 80% is usually pretty lean. And then 73%, I think is pretty normal in America. And, but yeah, super, super lean.
Yeah. It's interesting to just think about the majority of society, just their aversion to saturated fat. I so vividly recall being in New York in 2019. I think I was like 24 years old and I just started to go carnivore. And so as part of that, I was cooking all my meals and I was making very basic dishes. Like I took a ribeye, I'd chop it up, I'd bring it into the office, or I'd make a pound of ground beef. And I was in tech. So, there are a lot of these engineers that are they're plant-based, they're drinking Soylent, they're drinking Mountain Dew, pizza, they're like 30, 40 pounds overweight. And they're looking at me being like, dude, you're literally going to die of a heart attack. Right? Like I'm the best I've ever felt. I'm doing Ironmans, but you're telling me that I'm going to kill myself of a heart attack. It's just so crazy how we these things that we accept with our diet. And you see it, Harry sees it. It's insane.
Yeah, that is a good point. Someone's like saying they're just eating like objective crap, and they're just like, "Oh my God, you're really gonna die there," and it's like sipping on a soda or something like that. I mean that's some serious cognitive dissonance there. Yeah,
totally.
Yeah.
Well, you probably saw it in the airport when you're going to Texas. It's like if you look at an airport, there's no food to be found. It's just all processed shit out of a package that's made in a lab.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And nothing's actual food anymore, and I think that's why, when people would go vegan or go carnivore or go anything whole food, you're going to see an improvement, which is where there's some confounding sort of, information going on, because people do improve on specific whole food vegan diets. Obviously, Oreo cookies and heroin are both vegan, and so that's not necessarily going to get you where you want to go. But if you have a more rational approach and try to do like a whole food, trying to get the right proteins and enough fats and things like that, then yeah, you're certainly going to improve then on these things, because it's just chemical slop. There was I forget who said it originally, but someone said it's just like, human beings are the only animals that are intelligent enough to create their own food, and the only ones dumb enough to eat it. Yeah.
I love that quote.
Yeah.
It's getting scarier too, with just, I mean, if you're not paying attention, like there's obviously more and more of these products getting put on the market that have serious marketing dollars behind them. And the marketing plays for all these big food products have like the same playbook. And it's usually somewhere along the lines of having a celebrity endorsed product, and have them just push the narrative and get it out there to as many people as possible. And a lot of it targets young kids. Like if you look at food commercials from the 90s, there's an amazing one that I like to reference. It's amazing in the worst possible way. It's like a Pepsi commercial with Rihanna walking into a grocery store, and there's a kid sitting outside the store listening to a Rihanna song, and he sees Rihanna like walk up, her hair's blowing back, and he's like falling in love with her, listening to her music, and she's drinking a Pepsi. And it's like clearly targeting kids. And it's, you know, that's probably like one of the worst things you can put in your body is just straight sugar. So just the nefarious, I mean, you know, they're trying to sell product at the end of the day. And it's like the fact that they're targeting kids is seriously indicative of where we are at in terms of health as a country.
Yeah. I agree. And you always do, they always do target kids because, you know, you indoctrinate kids and then they're lifelong drug users, you know what I mean? Like, so that's why you go to schools and you try to addict these kids early, and then they, you know, and you got them for the rest of their life, you know, while they're still vulnerable to that persuasion as well. You know, it's funny you mentioned that. I remember like sort of a commercial that was, I think, you know, much more persuasive just because of the honesty of it. Was a Sprite commercial like in the 90s, and it was like Grant Hill. And it was like Grant Hill was like walking by, you know, playing basketball, whatever. And he's like, you know, drinking a Sprite as he walks off. And this kid just looks at that and he's like, Grant Hill drinks Sprite. Grant Hill drinks Sprite. Grant Hill drinks Sprite. And he's like, yeah. And obviously he's like drinking this Sprite, the kid does. And he's like going, he like, you know, takes a basketball, he's jumping up and he's like slow motion, like looking like he's going to dunk. And his like narrator goes, if you want to go to the NBA, and like he goes up and like stuffs the basketball like on the rim, like falls backwards, like, he's like, practice, you know, but if you want to quench your thirst, drink a Sprite. And I loved it because it was just like, it was, you know, it just cut through the bullshit of like, oh my God, Rihanna drinks Coke. Like, I have to drink Coke now. I'm going to be like Rihanna if I drink Coke, you know? And, you know, so it was refreshing in that sense. It was just like, hey, this is just a drink, you know? It's just like, if you're thirsty and you want something that tastes good, you know, buy this. Like if you want to actually do something with your life, then go do it.
Yeah. It's always interesting too, to like explore some of the history of how these products came to be in existence. Like that's a lot of what we've done in the Meat Mafia. Is like our primary platform is Twitter right now. And really how we grew is we started writing these informational threads on just the history of food and how we've gotten to this point. And one of the threads that we wrote that did really well was just on the origin story of Lunchables. And a lot of people don't realize this, but Lunchables is owned by Oscar Mayer. And in the 80s, they realized that like the deli meat bologna, the sales were doing terrible. So they were like, they got a marketing team together to like just emergency brainstorm ways of how they could increase bologna sales. So they started coming up with this combination of like Lunchables, like a convenience sandwich type snack. And they were going to market it towards moms. And what they realized is that in their product testing, kids were having so much fun playing and putting together the sandwiches and the combinations. They were like, oh shit, maybe we should market this towards kids instead. And then a couple iterations later, they start throwing the sugar in there, the Capri Suns. And now it's like parents are literally sending their kids to school with this garbage. You know, we have ADD, we have all these other issues with participation and distractions. And it's like, it all stems back from a company that was trying to just sell bologna because their deli meat sales were down.
Yeah. And that's you know, that's a good point too. You know, we have all these, you know, ADD and all these sorts of things, you know, and we just didn't really see this before. And you know, people argue, well, it was probably there. We just, you know, it was misdiagnosed. I was like, A, that's an assumption. And B, that's an assumption that doesn't actually, you know, fit the observed facts, you know, because we didn't have all these kids just running around, not doing homework. Like, you know, kids went there, they learned, and they, you know, they did reading, writing, and arithmetic. You know, I looked at my uncle's second grade Latin textbook. I'm going to say that again. My uncle's second grade Latin workbook. Okay. They were teaching Latin to second graders, second year Latin, by the way, in second grade. Okay. And I looked at that and I was like, what the hell is this? And I was like, oh yeah, that was Uncle Peter's. That was this Latin workbook. I'm like, you guys were teaching Latin? I think no one was taught Latin when I was going through school. but that is what you were taught. You were taught, the classics. You had a classical education, and that meant what it sounds like, from classical Greece. You learned, you studied and read, the Greek tragedies and plays, and learned, what they had been teaching people for 3,000 years, or 3,000 years ago, and it made a difference. You're learning Latin, you're learning Greek, you're learning the basis and fundamentals of language and arithmetic. For a second grader to be able to sit down and pay attention to like a lecture on Latin, like you got to be pretty switched on. And this is just part of the normal curriculum. And now we're doing as much as we can to infantilize people and to do even less and less for them. And it's like, oh, we have all these issues. Now we have to change how we're teaching people. We've been teaching people in this classical method for literally thousands of years. Why is it that this just doesn't work anymore? Has it just never worked ever? And so just no one has ever received a proper education, and now we're finally figuring it out? Probably not. We have thousands of years of trial and error on seeing what works and what doesn't. And now all of a sudden, it's not working as well. So obviously there's something else going on there, and I don't think that we've just always had, roaring ADD issues and just never diagnosed it. And as something I've said before, like, we have this, you have a problem, you have a pill sort of mentality now. And it's just like, oh, we have ADD. Here's this, here's this sort of amphetamine that will help you with that. ADD isn't caused by a lack of amphetamines that have just been invented, in the last sort of decade. It's not an amphetamine deficiency. It's not like, like scurvy, where it's like you have a deficiency in something, your body's not working properly. So it's just a bit bizarre to me that people think that these things have just been around forever, and that the only thing we've been missing is this pharmaceutical that just showed up last week. Clearly we're doing something else, and we're screwing with our brains and screwing with the brains of our children. And I think that is a very plausible explanation for that, this induction of really shitty food into kids' lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. I feel like you were speaking to it a little bit earlier, but it's like this dilution of standards is totally reflected in the food system, but in so many other areas of our society. There's a really cool video of this California high school that's going through like a physical fitness examination, and they all look like Marines. Like they all look incredibly fit, and it's from like the 50s or 60s. And it's like, it's a little propaganda in terms of like sign up for the military type of thing. But it was really impressive. Like if I had seen that like today, I would be completely shocked. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it feels like a reduction in the standards of like what we are promoting from a health standpoint. Like, why don't we want our kids to all be incredibly athletic, moving their bodies well at a young age? Like at age 18, that should be kind of like the benchmark, right? And now we just don't really think of it that way. We've kind of let things slip. So yeah, it's tough to watch and participate in. So
yeah, well, no, yeah, and that's the thing too, is that we're also sort of trying to change our societal norms and what we appreciate and don't appreciate. And trying to say, I'm not, saying that we should go and be mean to people and ridicule them for not being in shape or not looking a certain way, obviously. But now we're going to the other side of things, and we're sort of glorifying that and saying it's actually really good. There's like, I think, Sean Baker posted like this picture, like an Abercrombie picture of this woman who was sort of in quite tight clothing, but she was quite overweight. And then versus like, an early Abercrombie picture where these people are, Calvin Klein models, and obviously they're models, but like, but that idea of what the physical form should, it would ideally look like, that concept was very different. And and I guess you sort of go back and look at this, in the classical statuary and things like that as well, of the physical ideal. It was a, aesthetically, lean, strong body, And of course there were examples of some things that had like, larger sort of women. That was the symbol of, fertility and motherhood and things like that. So there are sort of little differences there, but by and large, people, looked at the physical form in a very different way. And now we're sort of being told to actually, no, this is, big is beautiful, all that sort of stuff. And that's fine. But, it can at the same time, make people not realize just how actually important this stuff is to your health, and it's one thing to look a certain way. I don't work out and eat what I do to look a certain way. I just don't really care. I do it because I feel good and it makes me feel healthy. And when I'm, working out and playing rugby, I work out so that I can play rugby, and I end up looking in shape as a result of that, but that's not why I'm doing it,
Yeah. We have a buddy that we met up with in Colorado that said that as a society, us stopping to judge books by their cover is like one of the worst things that we've ever done. And it's kind of an interesting point. And it's like, it's polarizing to say it, especially today in traditional society, but it's like, you look at that model or the mannequins or whatever, and it's like, take the morality out of it, the judgment. It's like, you're metabolically unhealthy, like by you being obese. So it's like, we want you to be healthy. So it's like, it's not an objectively beautiful thing for you to be metabolically unhealthy. And if you lose weight and go to the gym and play around with your dietary inputs, it's like, that's one of the most amazing things about fitness in general is like, besides you having like an underlying chronic disease, it's one of the fairest pursuits ever, where if you eat healthy and you change your lifestyle, it's like anyone is capable of losing weight and getting towards that body or that lifestyle that they want. So that's what motivates us, is to just try and spread that message.
Yeah. Well, and to piggyback on that, it's like the messaging is almost to make health subjective, when it's really not. Like, if you're in the hospital, you're not healthy. And like, there's some objective realities to being a healthy individual. And like, we can all agree that some of them are visible. So I think just by promoting those ideas in messaging, it's not good long-term. I mean, maybe it makes people feel better, but there's a collective issue there that is probably in need of being addressed.
Yeah, well, I definitely agree. And, I don't know if it's because they're trying to, not make people feel bad, which is, admirable, or if it's because they're trying to, promote, ill health and sedentary lifestyles, because that, just makes people a bit more compliant. I have my own sort of views on that, just because I just have a more cynical take on things. And I've just, I've just seen, shitty people do shitty things throughout history. And we get very, complacent living in, a place like America or Australia or the UK, or, most of Europe, really, Western Europe in particular, where we have had it good for a very long time. And, and we have had a sort of an independent, liberal system of governance, in the classical liberal sense of freedom and liberty, and people being able to direct the course of their own lives. And so because we've been able to do that for so long, we've had generation after generation after generation, we've gotten a bit soft, and we've stopped, we forgot exactly how hard it was to get there, and exactly what we had to do. And we don't teach history anymore. We certainly don't teach Latin. And so people don't remember and realize that the vast majority of civilizations and the vast majority of people who have ever lived have done so under tyrannical rule. And that is the norm, is that people are going to try to concentrate power, and they're going to try to take over, and they're going to try to control you for their own benefit. And if you don't push against that and fight against that, you will end up, becoming, serfs and slaves, which I think we honestly already are. I mean, you pay, like in Australia, like tax rates like 47%, and capital gains is like, it's just taxed as income, So it's just like your return on investment is just, it's just income, and then there's high taxes on property taxes and sales taxes, value added taxes, and all these sorts of things. And so, if you look at that, as a percentage of your year that you work, and that goes to the government, that you're working for the government, that all your money goes to the government, that you're a slave to the government. You're looking at, a minimum of 6 months of your life, you're working as a slave for someone else. Well, what was serfdom? Serfdom was you lived on the land, and obviously you weren't really allowed to move freely. You were tied to the land. And so if a lord like sold the land, like the serfs came with it. But you would even like free citizens who had land, that land would be on the Lord's land. And so you had to pay your dues. That's what I buy I buy a house here. I still have to pay property taxes, but I own it. No, I'm just leasing that land from the government, apparently. And you don't own a damn thing. And so they would have their crops and their fields, and you basically, sometimes you'd have a few days to bring in a crop before it would spoil, or a storm would come in and you'd ruin the crop. And it was a very temperamental thing. But you were required to bring in the Lord's crop first. And so, you had to work, dawn to dusk, doing that. And you have to, pulling this thing. And to the point that if it didn't go quick enough, or like a storm came in or something like that, you could lose your entire crop because you weren't there. It's just, sitting and rotting in the field. But you still had to pay the taxes. So, you had, an acre of wheat or whatever, you had to pay, a certain percentage of that, whether or not you brought it in. And so if your field went, spoiled because you were, forced to work in the Lord's field, you were still, responsible for 20% of that crop. And now you had to just figure out and buy it or whatever. They chuck you out and throw you in debtor's prison and things like that. And, what are we at now? Like, we're working for the Lord. We pay tax. We don't own land. Our time is not our own. The product of our labor is not ours. It belongs to the government. For 6 months out of the year, we have to work for them. And, so I think that we're already back there. I think, like, for 150 years in America before, income tax, whatever we do, I think the next thing that needs to happen is repealing the 16th Amendment with the federal income tax. Like, that's just got to go. And people, well, we have to pay for this. No, you damn well don't. 80% of the federal government is spending money on things that they are not constitutionally allowed to spend money for. That's a topic for another day, but maybe not. Maybe we can just get pissed off about that too. But you don't need to pay for these things because they're not supposed to exist in the first place. And we had 150 years, we didn't have that crap. And all the taxes, all your state, local, federal, everything, all your duties, all the taxes that you paid, all the money that went to the government, on average, accounted for 6 days work, right? So you worked for 6 days for the government. The rest of the time was your own. Now it's like minimum 6 months, right? Because even in America, it has a lower tax rate. You're still paying sales tax, you're paying property tax, you're paying all these other taxes, and it's estimated you're around 50%. 50% of your time goes to the government. And so that's 6 months of your damn life. And so in Australia, it's more. In other parts of Europe, it's more. And so, you're like 9 months out of the year, you're a slave, and it's absolutely miserable. I don't know what your guys' thoughts on that are.
Well, and then you hear things like Elizabeth Warren proposing a tax on unrealized gains, which is
right.
Which is like just another step in the crazier direction of just the messaging behind that. To me, is like, we don't care about you at all. We don't want you to have any sort of feeling of freedom. You're just going to work for the government in all these ways. We'll take care of you, but you'll never have any sense of like personal sovereignty. No. Which to me, it's like, it's just full capture at that point. But I think it's concerning because I think it's like made its way into the food system in a lot of ways. And I think even outside of that, just these ideas of like control and centralization. We actually started writing online with a guy who went on a harvest and kind of went into the big four packers of the meat industry in the US and did some like behind the scenes research. And like, uncovered the truths behind like what's happening in these big four packers and how they control basically all the supply of meat that's happening, or that's getting distributed in the US and in basically the developed world. And it's just it's crazy to think how much power just rides, is driven through these really big, large multinational companies and governments. I think they're one and the same, basically. We were talking with a buddy about earlier today about the tech companies in the US. They're just an extension of the government's ability to control us through data and telecommunications and other ways. I mean, it sounds crazy to say, but I mean, you don't own your data. They're at, like, in order to log into all these websites and get access to anything, you have to give every piece of information that you ever had. I remember when the internet was early on, and that was a weird thing to do, to have to put any sort of information in online. Now it's just normal. Yeah. So for me, I think there's a lot of different things happening, and they're all are centered around this idea of control and centralization.
Yeah. And I would think you're dead on as well. And, it goes back to just, that's just been the history of humanity. People try to consolidate power around themselves. And, when you centralize government, what does that do? That takes all the ownership and all the power and everything, it puts it into the government. It's like, oh, we can help you now. It's like a government that's powerful enough to bring about a utopia is also powerful enough to bring about totalitarianism and slavery and murders. I mean, this is what happened with all the totalitarian centralized governments, like the USSR, China. And I mean, China today is they still have gulags. They still have mass executions and murders. It's an open secret that that there's a genocide going on with the Uyghur Muslims, and they're imprisoning these people and murdering them and subjugating them and enslaving them. Why are we putting up with this crap? I really don't get that. Oh no, we have to. They're just so big. We just have to. We can't possibly compete without. That's what they said about the USSR. They said, oh, it's just too big. It's too powerful. Better red than dead. I was like, well, A, no, it's not. And B, that actually isn't a foregone conclusion that they were. I mean, it wasn't. That's why there's a place called America, and there is not a place called the USSR anymore. The assumption was that they were too powerful, it was too big, it was too this, it was too that. We couldn't just be like, yeah, no, F off. Now they're saying that with China. Why? It's the exact same argument. It's exactly the same flawed argument. Their economy is 1/4 of America's economy, and America's economy is not what it should be. When we pull off the restrictions, we pull off the regulations, and allow people to just live their life, they are wildly more productive. And this is a rule, and so, the more centralized and more controlled, because you centralize something, it goes in the government. Well, there are people in charge of the government, right? And there are people that aren't in the government. So now these people are in charge of these people. These are the slave masters. And then you have somebody at the top. Somebody is going to be in charge of the government. That person is an automatic totalitarian dictator in control of a slave state. Automatically, that is the nature of that program. And so when you do that, people become less productive. And the reason that China has become more productive in recent years is because they've sort of let off some of these regulations, sort of let people just get on with things. Even still, with opening things up and having Hong Kong as part of them, because that is that plays into the equation too, even though they've just completely stuffed that now. Their economy is 1/4 that of our beleaguered economy compared to what it could be and should be. And they have 4 times the population we do, right? So per capita, they are 1/16 as productive as America is. Okay, how are we not possibly able to compete with these people exactly? And how is it just not? We just couldn't possibly. Like, all we do to stop these things is just be like, right, we're just not going to trade with you. See ya. And just put in like serious restrictions. They're done. Tomorrow they require other people, hiring them to do things and make things cheaply there. And also they steal like $1 to $2 trillion worth of intellectual property every year. They have no regard for international patent laws. A new version of Windows comes out, everyone in China has it like that day. Did they just take it and bootleg it? And that's it. And so they do this with all sorts of things. There's all sorts of, there's a Confucius Institution, something like that. It's supposed to be about, knowledge and learning, things like that. It's just a spy operation that they use to like infiltrate into American universities. This is well published and documented. This is well known. And yet we allow them to get away with this shit. It absolutely blows my mind.
Yeah. And I mean, you're asking necessary questions too. And I think what's sad, particularly in Western society, is people are so afraid now of having a dissenting opinion or making any of this information public or asking these questions publicly, when people are thinking it. So I don't know if it's cowardice. I don't know if it's stupidity, ignorance. It's probably like a combination of all three. But if I was to go back to the point that you made on personal sovereignty, I think in a lot of ways, Harrison and I, and I'm sure yourself too, I could view this carnivore diet kind of as like the ultimate FU to serfdom. And that was kind of like my initial way to break out of the matrix. And I just hope that if there's anyone that's listening to this, that people realize just how big of an impact your diet can actually have. Because I feel like once I started taking conscious control of the food I was putting into my body and like consciously seeking out farmers to source it from and cook all my own meals, like everything changed. Like I physically changed, I mentally changed. You start to have the energy to stick up to some of the stuff, and you have vitality where it's like a lot of men out there now, it's like testosterone levels are the lowest they've ever been. Everyone's watching pornography. It's like they're addicted to these cheap forms of dopamine, and they're just going through life comfortably numb and compliant. So,
yeah.
Yeah. The idea of taking back a little bit of control can just go such a long way. Like, I think like sourcing your food with your farmer, it's really not anything that elaborate, but it's just that little extra step where you actually build a relationship. You're intentional about what you're buying. The person who's growing the food. It gives you a little bit more ownership. And then you go back home and you cook the food yourself. You're doing everything but killing the animal and butchering it at that point. So you're getting a little bit closer to the food system. I think it's like a really, really important process for people to start re-engaging with. It's something that we harp about all the time. And it's like core to how both of us got healthy again, and like how we've helped other people realize that there are ways to get healthy again.
Yeah. Well, and on that note too, you guys obviously, with the Meat Mafia podcast, obviously, you're being able to disseminate, your ideas and get other people's, on there and talk to different people about that. How did you said it started sort of on Twitter, but what made you guys decide to like actually do a podcast? And what was your sort of goal with that? Where did you want to take that and sort of lead people down? Was it purely just sort of educating people about like a carnivore diet or a diet in particular, or is there more than that to it?
Yeah, I think we were originally kind of just off-put by the idea that was getting pressed on kids with the like meatless Mondays and vegan Fridays. And not to say that we were really pushing a carnivore diet, but we're more so pushing a real foods diet, and including in that not the elimination or fighting back against the elimination of meat. Obviously, we're huge proponents of meat, but the idea of eliminating that from your child's diet is, I'm stealing the words from the person who we originally started writing for online, who's Texas Slim, but it's literally a genocide. I mean, you are bankrupting a generation of kids from nutrients that are essential for their brain development. There's insane pictures of B12 deficiencies, brain scans of kids who tried a vegan diet versus not having it. And you can see the insane difference that it has on a kid's brain imaging. And, with all the different problems out there that are happening in the food system, we think creating a simple message and creating a message that people can actually understand. The whole concept of dieting in general, I think, is really confusing. Like, as soon as keto came out, the core of it is great, But then like 5 years down the road, you fast forward and now you have all these keto cookies and keto Twinkies. And it's like, this isn't healthy. This isn't healthy either. So just making sure people realize like real foods are where it's at, start there. And there's ways to make it healthier, but like we're so far off base that we just need to start with looking at real foods versus processed foods and go from there. So that's kind of like where we come in, and we started thinking about this. Brett, I don't know if you want to tell the story about how we got going on the podcast, just because you seem to remember that one better than I did. I feel like we just kind of started.
Yeah, well, it was your idea because we were growing our Twitter really fast. And the thing is for us too, it's like, right, we don't have an MD like you, Dr. Chaffee, or anything like that, but we've been practitioners of this stuff for over 10 years. Like we've put in the 10,000 hours. We've experimented with all different types of diets, and we have a passion for it. And we were just motivated. It's like, we're 28, we're millennials. And a lot of our friends are overweight, they're obese, they have chronic diseases, and you see that trend, and it's sad. So for us, we were like, okay, the Twitter is doing well, but how do we create another form of content where, like, if we're talking to our friends and family and a family member, we can just send them a 45-minute clip of us speaking with you or a different type of doctor or a rancher. And maybe that'll just help them flip the switch and think about their food system a little bit differently and focus on solutions as to what's going on. So it really, for us, was just another way to connect with people that we've admired for the last years that have had a huge impact on the way we think about nutrition, and also create the type of content that we can send to our friends and family members to help them think about nutrition in a different way.
Nice. And how long have you been guys doing that now?
So we started the podcast in March, and we did a ton of episodes early on. Like we were recording like crazy, really just took to the idea of like higher volume, just like connect with as many people as possible. Don't really worry about kind of all the like, 2 podcasts a week type of thing. Like we just kind of cranked through it, and it helped us. We got better at podcasting. We figured out some of the kinks. We obviously are still figuring out a lot of the kinks. Most of it has been virtual, but we kind of just hit the ground running and tried to have as many cool conversations as possible and just get that out there and kind of build like a base and figure out how to do these types of things. And I think both of us have just taken a liking to it because we love talking to people about these topics that they're passionate about, that we're also equally as passionate about. And it's always, I don't think we've had a bad conversation yet. And it's like, it's brought about this, like, I think, building an audience is fun. And just seeing like the number go up, you're like, okay, people are like kind of paying attention now. Like for a while, it was like 2 months in, people who had been following us on Twitter were like, you guys have a podcast? And we had like 60 episodes on. Yeah. So it was fun just to kind of see things kind of develop and solidify.
Nice. Yeah. And what direction you want to take it? And we were talking off camera that you guys are really, really focusing on this as like full time, which I think is great, that you guys can do that, because obviously you're going to get the most out of it. You're going to get a much better quality, performance and product at the end of the day, product being your podcast. And so obviously that's, if you're able to do that, it's great that you can. Where do you want to take this in the future?
Yeah, I think there's a few different directions, and Harrison, jump in if I'm missing anything, but I think Harrison made a good point about all these like keto products that exist that aren't actually real foods. They're products. Like we met a KetoCon, Dr. Chaffee, and it's like you're walking the aisles and you're like, this stuff is legitimate garbage that's loaded with artificial sugar and seed oils. Part of what we want to do is we want to create a line of real food products that don't currently exist in the market. So we want to start with something simpler like cooking tallow, like beef tallow, and be able to do an educational campaign about how back in the day we used to cook with tallow and lard and we're healthier than we'd ever been. Start with something like tallow and then branch out to different types of products like steak bars with organ meats baked in, but have it really taste like gourmet and taste good, but put this whole educational campaign to it. So I think there's definitely the food angle that we're going towards now. I think we also want to be practitioners. Like our dream is to be able to buy farmland, have cows, have chickens, put on these experiences for people and really have that full line of like vertical integration. But for us, it's about like, we genuinely think that, collectively we can change the food system. So like, we want to create documentaries. We want to like go all in on this thing and grow the podcast and just like start with our small sphere of influence and just try and grow the message as much as we can.
Yeah. Well,
Couldn't get a better stuff.
yeah, no, that's badass, and well, I really hope well, I'm sure you guys will do it. You guys are doing it, so that's awesome, and yeah, I'm really excited for what the next few years, brings, because I think things are starting to sort of, eke into more of a mainstream discussion. It's not quite there yet, but it's going there. And you have like that Harvard study, looking at least asking the question, and it shows that there's interest, and it shows that there's okay, that people are paying attention and taking notice. And I think that's really, really good. And so now the more of these things we get out there, the better. And so you had the Harvard study that went well. And other things have come up recently, and now you're getting a little more documentaries. The sort of food lies thing is going to be coming out hopefully, next year, and that should be great. And then other things like Vinny Tortorich's Fat documentary and Beyond Impossible and things like that. They start showing the sort of the corruption in the system, and show that we've been lied to, and this is bullshit. And so it's starting to just get into more of the mainstream discussion, at least. And so I think that it's obviously very important to get products out there as well, because that's exactly what's competing out there. And so you get a product out there that is meat-based, that is healthy, and people like it and they want it, because they understand that it's healthy and it also tastes a lot better.
Yes.
These big corporations are going to have to start paying attention as well. And if they want to, start competing, they don't want someone else to come up and start competing with them. They're like, oh shit, okay, now we've got to make our own product. And then they're going to have to switch gears. And so I think that the more that we do this, and the more things, people like yourselves get out there and start, making products, the better position we're going to be in the long run. And so I think that probably within the next 5 years, this is going to be an actual mainstream idea. Maybe within the next sort of few years, this would be a mainstream idea, and we'll have more open discussions and debates and things like that about a carnivore diet. Like Sean Baker and Asim Malhotra were just on, I think it was like GBM, it was like Great Britain News or something like that. And they were talking about the carnivore diet, like really, like, what is this? And they sort of, went into it a little bit. That's very important, to get on those sorts of things. So, So I don't know. What do you guys think about the sort of the future of this? Where do you think it's going to be in 5 years?
Of what we're doing, or just in general?
Just in general, just the whole climate of food and carnivore and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's swinging back in the other direction right now. I think if you look at what's happening with the fake meat products that are out there, they're doing horribly. And I think that there's a slow awakening of people who are becoming more and more aware of the food system. Does that mean that everyone will wake up and figure out, what they need to be doing when it comes to engaging with their food? Probably not, but I think a lot of people are. So, I'm optimistic for the medium to long term. The short term might be a little bumpy, but yeah. Brett, anything?
No, I think we're both optimists, and I think a lot of it is about just putting out the right information and trusting that the truth is always going to prevail. So a lot of what I do is I have a personal Instagram account, and for years I've just been posting like my carnivore recipes and drinking raw milk and all this stuff. And I never tell people how to eat. I just show them what I'm doing. And over time, people will become curious because they see that I'm looking better and better and doing better. So they'll start to ask me like more about what I'm doing or what's the carnivore diet about. And that's when I can start to send them like different types of pockets of information and dispel all the bullshit that they've been hearing, because on social media, it's easy to share like some fraudulent statistic, like, oh, the red meat industry emits more greenhouse gas than all of transportation combined, right? The three of us know that that's blatantly false, but people see that and view that as fact. So I think as long as we can keep putting the right information out there and being like that proof of work that people can look up to, dude, people are going to start eating more animal products and realizing that they felt better than they ever have before. So we're optimistic, man.
Yeah. Well, awesome, man. Well, I'm just conscious of your time, and I just want to say, like, are you guys? Is there anything else that you wanted to, maybe talk about or express, or anything in particular you wanted to get out there and have people know about?
Yeah, I would just say, so we're heading to Georgia for a speaking engagement in September,
Nice.
called the Beef Initiative. And if people aren't up to date on what that is, it's basically a platform for beef distributors to participate in and distribute direct to consumer beef. It's a great cause. It's going to be out at White Oak Pastures. If people are interested in joining, I think it's going to be a great event. We'll be there. So just wanted to plug that. And then also, we're working on that tallow product. We're really excited to get it going. So next few weeks here, we're going to have that, and just keep an eye out for it.
Awesome. Yeah. And so and where can everyone find you? Obviously you have the podcast. What other sort of platforms can people track you down on? Do you have a website, things like that?
Yeah. So we're pseudo anonymous on the internet, even though people can find us if they want to. So we're the Meat Mafia. So my Twitter handle is @Mr. Salazzo, which is an ode to the Godfather, one of the best movies of all time. And then Harry's account is @Carney-Clemenza. And then on Instagram, we just have one Instagram account, which is the Meat Mafia Podcast. And then we also have a Substack account where we try and publish a new article every single day, just on different topics around nutrition and just updates of what's going on in the nutritional space. So we're really trying to ramp that up a lot.
Nice. Awesome. We'll get all those links. We can put those all in the description. And and when you get you said you're close to bringing that tallow product to market.
Yeah, we're a few weeks out from launching, so
Nice.
we'll have that ready to go soon, which is really exciting. We've been talking about it for a while, and just excited about the idea of having a product out there that really just checks all the boxes for what we believe. Like, you should be cooking all your meals. You should be embracing saturated fats. Like, that sort of ethos is core to how we operate. So we're just excited that that will be out in the consumer's hands soon.
Yeah. Perfect fuel for you for your 30 sets of deadlifting, Dr. Chaffee.
Yeah.
One of the best stories that anyone's ever told on our podcast. We get people that DM us about that all the time. They love it.
Yeah. Well, too, it's just crazy how much different your body just works. It just works. And like, and people just don't realize just how shitty they feel until they stop feeling shitty. It's just like, when all of a sudden you like, I remember when I would get like an injury in rugby, like I'd mess up my shoulder and like the doctor would give me some Vicodin or something like that. And all of a sudden it was just like all the other aches and pains and like my back and everything like that would just like be gone. I'm like, wow, I didn't even realize how shitty I was feeling until all of a sudden all this pain was gone. I didn't realize how much pain I was in, perpetually. And then, it wasn't until I just, got rid of, all these plants and crap like that like all of a sudden my body started, working well. And I didn't have all these problems. Wasn't even aware that I had. And I remember just dawning on me. I was just like, I felt like crap my entire life. I had no idea. And then, so when people say like, well, I would try it, but like, I actually feel good. I don't feel like there's a problem. So I don't feel like there's anything to fix. Like, I don't think you realize how bad you already feel. You just don't realize how shitty you feel, and that's something that I think everyone should experience, just try, a couple weeks, couple months, a month or so, and you will see, after 2 weeks, this shit will be out of your body, and you won't have necessarily your ideal body, but you will feel so much better. And then you start eating as crap again, you start feeling like crap. And so I think that's, it's just, for me, I have just like a complete aversion to any of that stuff. So, but well, great. Well, thank you very much, guys. I really appreciate you guys coming on, taking the time, and I'm sure that we'll be doing more of these again. I hope that we do, and good luck with everything. And I don't know exactly when this will go out, but possibly if your tallow thing is up and ready at that time, we'll put a link for that in there as well. And right. Awesome. Well, thanks a lot, guys. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right.